When we picture Confucius, we usually imagine a quiet, stone-faced sage calmly dispensing ancient proverbs to respectful students. But read the original text of his teachings, and that image immediately shatters. The real Confucius sighed in deep despair, scolded his followers as uncultivated, and frequently lost his temper. In one entry, after a disciple collected corrupt taxes for a usurping family, an angry Confucius disowned him entirely, instructing the rest of his students to beat the drum and assail him. We only know about these outbursts because of the Lunyu, or the Analects. It is not a polished, neatly organized philosophical treatise. It is a chaotic, fragmented collection of sayings and situational dialogues. Compiled in the early 4th century BCE, decades after his death, the text jumps from thought to thought, often entirely omitting the historical context of the conversations it records. You have a disorganized record of localized arguments and spontaneous advice. Yet this specific, messy collection somehow became the absolute bedrock of Chinese civilization. Confucius approached teaching as a deeply adaptive practice. If a student asked him a question, he refused to provide a single universal answer. He believed that speaking to someone unready to hear the message was a waste of words, while failing to speak to someone who was ready was a failure of the teacher. His response depended entirely on the specific flaws and needs of the person standing in front of him. This animated diagram illustrates his method. Two different students could ask the exact same question about Ren, a term meaning kind-heartedness or supreme virtue, and receive entirely different definitions tailored to their personal shortcomings. But beneath these shifting answers was what he called an all-pervading unity. Confucius tied the internal feeling of kind-heartedness directly to the external, physical practice of strict propriety and ritual. He ultimately defined kind-heartedness as the ability to subdue oneself and return to propriety. This meant placing strict limits on your senses, refusing to look at, listen to, speak about, or make any movement toward anything contrary to ritual order. This personal discipline scaled directly up to the state. Confucius taught that a society would only remain stable if everyone rigidly fulfilled their specific roles. The ruler must act as a ruler, the minister as a minister, the father as a father, and the son as a son. His teachings were never meant to be read as absolute, abstract laws. They functioned as a highly flexible diagnostic tool, designed to correct specific human behaviors and lock a chaotic society back into harmony. Because his advice was so deeply tied to specific, unrecorded situations, the physical text of the Lunyu left future generations to navigate a landscape of fragmented, highly situational instructions. Its survival alone was dramatic. During the first emperor of Qin's literary inquisition, where countless texts were destroyed, an old text version of the Lunyu was saved only because it was secretly hidden inside a wall in Confucius's own mansion in Khufu. Here we see a diagram representing the textual chaos that followed. By the Han Dynasty, 3 competing versions of the text were circulating. They originated from different regions, Lu, Qi, and the Old Text, and featured different chapter counts, misaligned sequences, and conflicting sentence wordings. Resolving this required immense scholarly intervention. During the 2nd century, figures like Zhang Xuan had to write comparative commentaries, analyzing the variations line by line to interpret the original intent. This exhaustive effort continued until the 3rd century master He Yan finally collected all previous commentaries into a single definitive compilation, selecting the base text that survives today. Stripped of its original context, the text could never stand alone. It required centuries of active reinterpretation by later scholars to remain a coherent guide for the empire. It wasn't until the Song dynasty, over 1,000 years after Confucius lived, that the Lunyu was elevated to ultimate canonical status in Chinese philosophy. The scholar Zhu Xi cemented its legacy by making it a core pillar of the Shi Su, or 4 books. This move solidified the Confucian worldview as the basis of the state's educational and civil systems. Confucius famously described himself as a transmitter and not a maker. He did not view himself as an inventor of new truths, but as a preserver seeking to pass down the lost wisdom of antiquity. Yet he gave a clear warning against passively consuming that wisdom. Learning without thought is labor lost. Thought without learning is perilous. The true enduring power of the Lunyu lies exactly in its conversational, unresolved format. The Lunyu functions as a living cultural grammar, compelling every new generation of readers to actively engage in a continuous moral dialogue with the past.